Clerk will read the caption to a group of privileged resolutions.
Recognizing Loving Hearts, Helping Hands, 2015 Heart of the Community Employee Community Service Award recipient, Coosa Valley Credit Union. Recognizing Loving Hearts, Helping Hands, 2015 Heart of the Community Award of Honor recipient, Evelyn Hamilton. Recognizing Loving Hearts, Helping Hands, 2015 Heart of the Community Award of Honor recipient, Randy Quick. Recognizing Loving Hearts, Helping Hands, 2015 Heart of the Community Young Heart Award of Honor recipient, Allie Friedman. Recognizing Loving Hearts, Helping Hands, 2015 Heart of the Community Business Community Service Award recipient, the Darlington School. Recognizing Loving Hearts, Helping Hands, 2015 Heart of the Community Award of Honor recipient, Chris Carey. Recognizing Loving Hearts, Helping Hands, 2015 Heart of the Community Award of Honor recipient, Ruth Price Forrester, and for other purposes. That completes the reading of the privileged resolutions.
Is there objection to the adoption of the privileged resolutions? The chair hears none, and the resolutions are adopted. We need Gerald down here, don't we? Okay.
I just have to find the script. I'm sorry.
Why don't you? No, this is what we need. Hey, Mr. Clerk. My mic's off. So we need do we have a script for that? Chair recognizes Representative Green for a motion. Just a minute, Representative. We are back in order, and we're back to taking up the business that we were sent here to do. So I'm going to ask you to remain in your seats unless you have important business. You can take that outside. Give the members in the well your attention. Gentlemen may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I ask that the House adhere to its position on Senate Bill 100 and that a committee of conference be appointed.
Representative Green has moved that this House adhere to its position on Senate Bill 100 and that a committee of conference be appointed. The clerk will read the caption.
Senate Bill 100 by Senator Harper, the 7th, being entitled an act to amend Title 40 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to motor vehicles and traffic, so as to provide for applicability with current federal regulations in the safe operation of motor carriers.
Is there objection to the gentleman's motion? The chair hears none, and this House has adhered to its position on Senate Bill 100. The chair appoints as a committee of conference Representative Green from the 151st, Representative Tanner from the 9th, and Representative Terry Rogers from the 10th.
Sir, there's a lot of academic curiosity out there. What did I do? About that. Oh, none of us have ever seen that. I won't make it twice. Just getting all roads with new water. Get one written.
I had to write it in.
Ah, okay.
And you adhere. You either adhere or receive. That's right. We've received it, but we never adhere. That's right. Continue to insist.
We'll have a seminar on adhering sometime other than the evening of day 40. And I'll be there on the front row taking notes. Okay. Why don't we do... Okay. Senate Bill 4. Who's doing it? Okay, where's Hamilton? I guess let's go to, what Taylor is that? That's Chair recognizes Chairman Hamilton for a motion. House will be in order. Chairman Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that we agree to the Conference Committee on Senate Bill 4. Gooch, Beach, and Franklin. Yeah. Franklin, Raymond Beach, and Big Gooch.
Are you ready? Chairman Hamilton moves that the House adopt the Committee of Conference report on Senate Bill 4. The clerk will read the Conference Committee report.
The Committee of Conference on Senate Bill 4 recommends that both the Senate and the House of Representatives recede from their positions that the attached Committee of Conference substitute the Senate Bill 4 be adopted. For the Senate, Senator Gooch, the 51st, Senator Beach, the 47th, Senator Ginn of the 21st. For the House, Representative Hamilton of the 24th, Representative Wendell Willard of the 51st, and Representative Beskin of the 54th.
Chair recognizes Chairman Hamilton to explain the Committee of Conference report on Senate Bill 4.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We made three changes from the bill that was passed over here. The first was we added some lean language in there dealing with solar alternative energy on redevelopment projects, which was actually in another Senate bill. We removed the amendment that I put in that caused all the controversy, but by removing that amendment, we also then further clarified the scope of this bill and made it within a half a mile of the rail system, which means that this bill specifically only deals with the belt line. And so we've left all other language the same, and it only deals specifically with the belt line. And that's what the conference committee does. I will tell you that all the utility contractors have signed off. The City of Atlanta, the Beltline has signed off, ACCG and GMA, so everybody's happy on this particular language. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, or Chairman Wendell Willard would be happy to speak if we think it's needed. So, Mr. Speaker, I'll answer any questions or yield to well.
You have a couple of questions if you yield.
Okay.
Chair recognizes Chairman Setzler to your right for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
Absolutely.
To my friend in the well, there was much debate in committee. In fact, we discussed this as this came through the floor of the House, limiting the provisions to the core counties around the Beltline. I think isn't it true the concern was this is in essence intergovernmental. This allows intergovernmental agreements on steroids, if you will, in a manner of speaking, and in an effort to limit it to just the counties or just the area of the Beltline, an amendment was put on committee and strongly affirmed by this House to ensure that. I don't see that amendment that was offered still in the bill.
Is it off? Is it taken off?
And if it
I
is,
believe it's still in there, the MARTA Act. It's matter of fact, but we even further restricted it by talking about the specific location of the belt line. So not only did we limit the 3 counties that are affected by MARTA, but we further restricted it for a very, very specific area. So this is the only, and that's one of the reasons that the contractors accepted it, was it only deals, everything else stays the same except for the belt line.
So the change in conference further restricted it. It did not open it up.
Absolutely, further restricted to a very, very small, specific geography, which is basically the belt line.
Appreciate your work on that.
Thank you.
Do you further yield?
I'll yield for another.
Chair recognizes Chairman Roberts to your right for a question.
Gentleman yield.
Absolutely, to the temporary speaker.
No, I would have moved to Sine a while ago. Is it not, does the gentleman yield?
Yes, absolutely.
Is it not true that within this bill, the question that was just asked, it goes back to if 10,000 acres or more. And currently right now in Georgia, is it not further true that only the Beltline is the only project that exists today?
That is exactly true. This specifically, there's a number of belts and suspenders, but it only deals with the belt line itself.
Thank you for your work. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I think we've covered this before. We've talked about the changes, and I would ask for your favorable consideration for the Senate Bill 4. Thank you very much. I yield the well.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Chair recognizes Chairman Willard to speak to the conference committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't want to belabor what my friend Representative Hamilton talked about, but there's a couple of things just to mention that follow up on what Representative Seltzer raised. The language was restricted more. When you go to page 3, when we talk about the definition, it begins on line 59, which is a surface transportation project. We added language beginning on line 69, which talks about specifically restricting this to the Beltline, because provided further, the project is within 1/2 mile of a transportation communications utility corridor which has been designated by the local governing body, which would be Atlanta, on or before January 1, 2015, or within the boundaries of a tax allocation district, which again is Atlanta, authorized under the provision of Chapter 44 of this code. That is the language that means just to the Beltline. The other major thing we did as far as a change, which was a concern to a lot of the local governments, was there was a provision here addressing the cost of relocation of utilities. It was unknown what that may do as far as how much would be involved, would it be on public streets or whatever. And because of the change we put in with that definition, leading it to the actual physical belt line, the utility companies were agreeable to have removed the language that was located, and it now would have been on page 8, but it starts, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 ends on the top of page 8, and you had under the old bill, it was paragraph 6, which talked about this relocation of utilities. That was removed. So everybody, including the local governments, the utility companies, the contractors, are all satisfied with the fact of how it's now be limited. And I would encourage you to support this. It's a good program for Atlanta to have the ability to find private partners to work with them on the development of this large corridor, which is going to have a substantial impact to the city. Thank you. I yield the well, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman has yielded the well. On the adoption of the Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 4, all those in favor of the adoption of the Conference Committee report will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. What purpose does Representative Quick rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask to be excused under Rule 133 as this pertains to downtown development authorities.
Lady has that right, and the journal will so reflect. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the adoption of the Conference Committee report, the ayes are 166, the nays are 2, and the Committee of Conference report has been adopted by this House. I'm not doing these two until the governor gets here. Let's get... You ready? Chair recognizes Representative Ballinger for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to make a motion that the House agree with the Senate substitute to HB 268.
Representative Ballinger has moved that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 268. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 268 by Representative Ballinger, the 23rd, to be titled an act to amend Code Section 19-7-5 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated, relating to reporting of child abuse and when it is mandated or authorized.
Chair recognizes Representative Ballinger to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, this is a very simple, there was one slight modification that was made as it moved through the process with our friends over in the Senate. On lines 55 and 56, reasonable cause to believe was inserted. Previously, it said reliable information. It also mirrors the language that was already existing in the bill on line 18. So it just kind of tightened up the language, and that was the only change that was made to the bill as it moved through our partners over in the Senate. I'll be happy to yield any questions.
Do you have a question, I think. Do you yield?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I do.
Chair recognizes Representative Coach Williams to your right for a question. He waives. No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I encourage your favorable consideration.
On the lady's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 268, all those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the lady's motion, the ayes are 167, the nays are 0. This House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 268. Chair recognizes Representative Darlene Taylor for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 426.
Representative Taylor has moved that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 426. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 426 by Representative Taylor, the 173rd. Be entitled an act to amend Code Section 48-8-3, the official code of Georgia annotated, relating to exemptions from sales and use tax.
Chair recognizes Representative Taylor to explain her motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This evening, I come to bring you the community health tax exemption. The Community Health Center system improves the access for comprehensive primary care for Georgians. From an economic perspective, this is a win-win. It allows clinics to hire more staff, which will pay more state payroll taxes. It will equate to approximately 8,500 patient visits. These are reimbursed at about a third less than Medicaid. Patients have better health care. They have a very good level of primary care. This measure will allow an increased access to health care without spending additional dollars. In fact, this exemption results in a net savings to the state of $2.6 million. This bill includes a very good, sensible amendment from the Senate. And I welcome this amendment. It corrects the sales tax use on food that is donated for hunger relief and disaster relief. An issue has arisen with the Department of Revenue because of a regulation taxing food goods that are donated to the food bank. Grocery stores donate 44 million pounds of food to Georgia's 8 regional food banks. This is more than 1/3 of the 121 million pounds distributed in 2014. Every week, over 150,000 Georgians are served by our food banks. This is a critically important food donation. In summary, the return on investment for Georgia through these tax exemptions are significant and benefit to all. It's jobs, it's health care, it helps our neediest, it saves money, and it's common sense. Mr. Speaker, I will stand for questions, and if there are none, I ask this body to agree to the Senate substitute.
You have no questions.
Thank you.
On the lady's motion that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 426, all those in favor of the motion will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the lady's motion, the ayes are 168, the nays are 0. This House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 426. Go down the middle aisle. Go down. Chair recognizes Representative Clark for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I move that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 436.
Representative Clark has moved that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 436. Clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 436 by Representative Clark on the 101st to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 17 and Title 31, the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to the control of venereal disease, so as to require that physicians and healthcare providers offer HIV and syphilis testing of pregnant women in their third trimester of pregnancy.
The chair recognizes Representative Clark to explain her motion.
Mr. Speaker, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, again, House Bill 436 allowed an ask from a physician to a pregnant woman for testing in the third trimester, and this was for either HIV or syphilis. And they have added in the Senate establishing parity between public health advanced practice registered nurses and those who work in the community health and those who work in community service boards. So it just creates parity between the two nurse organizations. If there are no questions, Mr. Speaker, I
You have no questions.
Thank you. And I urge your favorable consideration of the Senate substitute to House Bill 436.
On the lady's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 436, all those in favor will vote aye, those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the lady's motion, the ayes are 156, the nays are 10. This House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 436. Chair recognizes Representative Duncan for a motion.
Mr. Speaker, I move that this House agree to the Senate substitute as amended by the House for House Bill 152.
Representative Duncan has moved that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 152 as amended by this House. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 152 by Representative Duncan on the 26th to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 3, Title 3 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to the regulation of alcoholic beverages generally.
Chair recognizes Representative Duncan to explain the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Senate only made a couple of changes to this bill. First, they cleaned up a couple of Scribner errors, And secondly, they added a new provision. There's a new product that has begun to show up on the marketplace that's unvetted. It's called powdered alcohol, and many in this room have probably heard the media talking about it. This is a substance that there could be 15, 16-year-old kids showing up that have a bag of powdered alcohol, and it's not illegal as powder, but mixed with a simple bottle of water. So in this provision, the state outlaws 47 bills have been passed or have been presented in 28 different states since 2015 in states all across this country to eliminate this powdered alcohol until there's further study. You'll also see an amendment on your desk, AM 360532, and there was a floor amendment made in the Senate that was a little bit overreaching, and the senator carrying the bill for me has also agreed to accept this amendment. With that, Mr. Speaker, I'll answer any questions.
You don't appear to have any questions.
Ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you.
Is there any objection to the adoption of the amendment? AM 360532. Is there any objection? Chair hears none, and the amendment is adopted. On the gentleman's motion that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 152 as amended by this House, all those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 151, the nays are 13. This House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 152 as amended by this House. Chair recognizes Representative Tanner for a motion.
Mr. Speaker, I motion to agree to the Senate substitute for House Bill 63.
Representative Tanner has moved that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 63. Clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 63 by Representative Tanner of the 9th to be entitled an Act to amend Article 2 of Chapter 7 of Title 48, the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to the imposition, computation, and rate of and exemptions from state income taxes.
Chair recognizes Representative Tanner to explain his motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a GED employer tax credit bill that this chamber passed a few weeks ago. The only change that was made in the Senate to this bill was they lowered the aggregate amount of liability that the state could have from $2 million to $1 million per year. I'm in agreement with that change, and I would ask this House to agree so we can pass this legislation. Mr. Speaker, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
You have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
On the gentleman's motion that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 63, all those in favor of the motion will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines on the gentleman's motion. The ayes are 167. The nays are 0. This House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 63. Chair recognizes Representative Williamson for a motion?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House agree to the Senate substitute of House Bill 552.
Representative Williamson has moved that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 552. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill number 552 by Representative Williamson, the 115th, to be titled an act to amend Title 33, the official code of Georgia annotated relating to insurance so as to provide for changes to the captive insurance company provisions.
The chair recognizes Representative Williamson to explain his motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If you'll recall, House Bill 552 left this chamber unanimously. It was an insurance department initiative to grow our captive insurance market in Georgia. Sent it over to the Senate. There's two small changes, one of which had actually gone through our insurance house subcommittee it's on behalf of the Federal Home Loan Bank. It clarifies that Federal Home Loan Bank collateral rights for pledged assets by all member insurance companies are treated the same way the advances from the Federal Home Loan Bank are to our financial institutions in Georgia. Fully supportive of that measure. The second change the Senate made was after further study, it's obvious that if we move in this direction of making Georgia a more captive insurance-friendly state, that we might as well go ahead and drop the premium tax for all captives doing business in the state of Georgia. And the initial results, the chatter going through the insurance industry right now is the insurance department's already had several companies contact our State Department of Banking and Finance about repatriating their captive insurance companies to the state of Georgia. So it should be very good for the insurance environment and ability to grow more jobs and affect the change that were intended by this initial legislation. So I would urge for your favorable consideration of this Senate substitute. Be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I'd be happy to yield the well.
You have a question if you care to yield.
Yes, I'll be happy to.
Chair recognizes Representative Henson to your left for a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Will the gentleman yield?
Yes, ma'am.
By lowering the premium tax, I believe that's what you said, how much is that going to cost the state of Georgia?
When you say cost the state, over
do
what
we
period?
Lose money on it by?
So the state of Georgia right now collects about $1.7 million in premium taxes. But the state of Georgia, modeling this same premium tax that South Carolina, a sister neighboring state, has, if we only collect 1/2 the premium amount, if our premiums grow by only 1/2 what theirs have gone up to, we will be revenue positive with this. And don't forget that our gross domestic product for the state of Georgia is over around 2.5 times our neighboring states. So it will be very easy for us to hurdle past their premiums, given all the advantages the city of Atlanta and the Atlanta region has for the financial services industry. So it is very much supported by the Department of Banking and Finance, and I think it'd be healthy for everybody, the entire financial services sector in Georgia.
So just as a follow-up.
Yes, ma'am.
And my math isn't the greatest. The state of Georgia will be getting $750,000 or more less than we've been getting. Is that correct?
Well, it's not static. These premiums are paid as the year progresses. The bill wouldn't go into effect until July the 1st. But in the meantime, you would have our Home Depots and Coca-Colas and well, I'm not speaking for them, but large publicly traded companies would look to start moving their pure captives here, as well as other captive insurance companies that are currently domiciled in other states like South Carolina. So to put it in perspective, Representative Henson, right now the total premium volume for the captive insurance space in Georgia is about $78 million. South Carolina, having recently enacted more premium tax friendly legislation, their premiums are in excess of $800 million, virtually 10 times our size. So they're at this same run rate, the same premium tax level, they're collecting enormously much more gross premium tax dollars to their state than we are, and we shouldn't let that happen. We ought to have those captives right here in Georgia. So if there's no further questions, be happy to answer any follow-up questions.
You had further questions if you care to yield.
Mr. Speaker, I think the legislation speaks for itself, and I'd be happy to yield the well and ask for your favorable consideration.
You didn't know that the next question was from Chairman Houston. So, no, it's okay. You blew her off. What purpose does Chairman Houston rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that this was a very, very friendly question? And thank you for Representative Williamson for having to bring money back to our state that's been overseas too long. Thank you.
On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 552. All those in favor of the motion will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. And the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 168, the nays are 0, and this House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 552. Chair recognizes Chairman Dempsey for a motion.
I move that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 568.
Chairman Dempsey has moved that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 568. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 568 by Representative Dempsey, the 13th, to be entitled an act to amend Article 3 of Chapter 7, Title 19 of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated, relating to determination of paternity.
Chair recognizes Chairman Dempsey to explain the Senate substitute.
House Bill 568 left our chamber with an amendment that was added on the House floor. The author of that amendment worked to craft language after it left here that went into the Senate committee to revise those measures. The language was agreed to by the original author of the amendment. It was updated there. It has just passed across in the other chamber unanimously as well as here. The measure will still protect the privacy of the individual and allows the Department of Human Services, through rules and regulations, to schedule to destroy the genetic material in a timely and appropriate fashion. If there are any questions, I will take them, Mr. Speaker. If not, I would appreciate everyone's support.
You have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
Lady has yielded the well. On the lady's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 568, all those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. And the clerk will unlock the machines. See if Burns is ready. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the lady's motion, the ayes are 167, the nays are 0, This House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 568. Chair recognizes Chairman Burns for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd make a motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 339.
Chairman Burns has moved that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 339. Clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 339 by Representative Burns, the 159th, be titled an act to amend Article 2, Chapter 7, and Title 48. The official code of Georgia annotated relating to the imposition rate and computation of state income taxes so as to extend the tax credit for film, video, or digital production in this state.
Chair recognizes Chairman Burns to explain his motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the House, this is the interactive entertainment production tax credit that this body supported overwhelmingly or unanimously a couple of weeks ago. It's been in place for several years and it's been very, very successful. When it went to the Senate, believe it or not, sometimes fact is stranger than fiction. They made an improvement to it, and actually put a little bit of language in the bill that allowed the pre-approval of credits that would further entice companies from around the country to come locate here and continue to establish these high-paying jobs in Georgia. With no changes in the qualifications, there's still very strict qualifiers for them to qualify for the credits, and it's a good addition to the bill, and I'd ask this body to support it. Mr. Speaker, I yield for questions if there are any.
You got a couple of questions. Do you yield?
I do yield.
Chair recognizes the chairman of the Transportation Committee, Chairman Roberts, to your right for a question.
Does the gentleman yield?
Absolutely, to the gentleman.
So I'm trying to get this straight. Is it not true that what you're saying is the bill that you had drafted was an insufficient bill and the Senate had to make it better?
I know, Mr. Chairman, that's difficult to believe, but yes, it is.
Hey.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
They did slightly improve it. Thank you. Thanks for that question.
Do you yield for another question?
Begrudgingly, yes.
Chair recognizes Representative Taylor to your right for a question.
Gentleman, yield.
I do yield.
Is it not true that the film industry brings about just over $5 billion in economic development to the state every year?
Absolutely, and some really high-paying jobs, and we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I think we've had several good questions, and if it pleased the body, I would yield the well and ask your favorable support.
On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 339, all those in favor of the motion will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. For what purpose does Representative Dudgeon rise?
Mr. Speaker, as a recipient of this tax credit, I ask Rule 133 to be recused.
The gentleman has that right. The journal will so reflect. Clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the gentleman's motion. The ayes are 161. The nays are 0. This House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 339. Chair recognizes the chairman of the House Rules Committee, Chairman Meadows, who gets his usual Day 40 greeting.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do not love the rest of y'all. I'm going with the Speaker. Contrary to what I told you earlier, there will be a Rules Committee meeting at 8:15.
This House is going to be in recess until 8:30 p.m.